Okay. Now, if there's no comments, thoughts, or questions, I think I'll jump into my talk, which I just want to say I'm a little tired. I drove to San Jose yesterday. I had to go to a memorial for my sister-in-law, and I drove back today. So, a little tired, but really grateful to be here. And what I want to talk about is something called the tentativeness of life. And it's a phrase I got from Jack Kornfield's book, A Path with Heart. And I've used it in the Year to Live group that I facilitate pretty much every year. And I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago, last week, 2 weeks ago. And so I thought I'd reflect on this for a Dharma talk because I think it's been up a lot. Tentative can mean uncertain, usually means uncertainty. And that's what life is. There's an uncertainty to life that we often don't pay attention to because we go through thinking, oh, this is going to happen, and we make plans, and then there's that's going to happen, and things happen that knock us off kilter, or things shift constantly. I was thinking of a friend of mine who she's Syrian. She lives in Damascus. I was in a small conference a couple of weeks ago in Italy, which she came to. We're both working on a project, an archaeology project, and she has to go to Beirut in order to fly to Italy because no flights from Western Europe go to Syria. And it's normally a 2-hour drive from Damascus to Beirut, but it took forever. And this was before the latest round of attacks. And so after our conference, she went to Berlin to visit her sister. Their mom died last month, and so they wanted to spend some time together. And I texted her last week, and she said all her flights had been canceled. She had to find her way back. She found one flight, and there was probably not going to be any way to get from Beirut to Syria. And she'd let me know when she got there. And I haven't heard from her. And that either is, I'm thinking perhaps because she forgot. It's not her job to tell me she's okay. But it could be that because stuff is just going on, because things happen. We think we understand, we think we know, and there are people in this world who live in really unstable situations. I'm very privileged. I'm a white lady living in a comfortable home in Burbank. I have a supportive relationship. I've had some good jobs. I'm in pretty good shape, but so many people live in really scary environments, and most of us don't live in these dire conditions. Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer, transgender, those folks are targeted. They have a very different experience of the world than I do. Right now, Haitians are dehumanized in the most atrocious and ugly way. So this tentativeness of life is present in so many ways, and it's really important for us to recognize this. There's a saying, I don't know where I got it from. I might have gotten it from Jack Kornfield somewhere in one of his writings. When it talks about life, and it says, we just think we have time. We go through thinking, oh, I probably have, according to the actuarial tables, I should live another X number of years. And it's like, and then I always say, I could get hit by a truck tomorrow. So how am I showing up today? Um, you know, it's in the Path with Heart, when Jack talks about the tentativeness of life, he says it's a reflection on our mortality, which it is. And the reflection on a reflection on our mortality is a really wise way to reflect on how we're living our lives. Monastics do that all the time. They meditate in cemeteries or charnel grounds. I have my sister-in-law's cremains, and I found some little mason jars. And I put her cremains in a bunch of mason jars, and I brought them with me yesterday to the memorial, and I felt like as a dealer. I go, "Psst, you want some of Joan?" And people were very excited to take part of her, to share her, or to keep her with them. But to have this, this familiarity and comfort with the recognition that this death is part of life. If we didn't want to die, we shouldn't have been born. That's the first thing. And so to have that comfort and to reflect on the mortality allows us to live with a little bit more ease, because it's not something that, if we do it right, then that won't happen. Jack says that we often ask the questions. It invites us to ask the question, have I lived well? Have I lived fully? Am I living well? Am I living fully? And when I first looked at this topic as a talk, I was also somehow looking at some Viktor Frankl quotes, or some of his stuff. And he is, for those who don't know, he was a German psychologist, psychotherapist, number of things. And he was in several concentration camps during World War II. I think he lost most of his family in concentration camps. And he wrote a couple of books, but his most famous is called Man's Search for Meaning. And he talked about how we spend so much time chasing happiness and stuff to make us happy. We chase the meaning of life. What is it? When we find the meaning of life, then we will have arrived. And, it sounds so much like the Buddha. It sounds like the second noble truth. Craving is the essence of our suffering, wanting things to be a particular way, and then thinking that is going to bring us everlasting happiness, ignoring the reality of impermanence. So there's no answer out there, and chasing it is futile. I was thinking about it. It's like I was thinking about chasing the meaning of life as if we've misplaced it somewhere, and if we find it, we'll figure it out. Like I put it in the freezer with my keys or something, and I'm like, oh, there it is, and now I'm good. So he also said, Frankl said, we need to stop asking about the meaning of life and instead think of ourselves as those who are being questioned by it. He said, the question life asks us, we can realize in the meaning of the present moment not only changes from hour to hour, but also changes from person to person. The question is entirely different in each moment for every individual. And this is, again, what the Buddha taught. Only in this moment will we understand the next thing to do. Only in this moment will we have the appropriate response, when we're fully present, when we're not caught up in shoulds and have tos and what will people say and what will people think or whatever. It's like, what is the appropriate action right now? And it changes regularly. Well, how often have we found, oh, okay, this is it. This is always the way I'm going to do this. And then you realize after doing it, it worked for a couple of times, and it's like, oh, it doesn't work anymore, but I'm still trying to do it the same way because it worked 20 years ago, and I don't want to have to figure out something new. But when we're present, then we begin to recognize what's going on right now. And again, this is also the Buddha. When he was on his deathbed, his disciples were saying, now what are we going to do? Who's going to be our teacher? And he said, I spent 45 years teaching you. You have what you need. Ehipasiko, find your own way with these teachings. It unfolds for each of us. There's no one size fits all. There's the guidelines, but there's no here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 steps to a perfect life. If you do these things all the time, then you're guaranteed happiness. It's like, how do we show up how do we stay present? You know, what's appropriate in this moment? That's equanimity, the appropriate response to right here, right now. Last week, I talked about choiceless awareness and being present so that we can wisely greet the moment. And we are creatures of habit. We need to be creatures of habit. We need to not have to figure out how to drive a car every time we get into a car. We need to have these things that we do by rote. That's the shortcuts the brain does. We need that to exist in our lives. But we also have to be present, to have some discernment about what makes sense right now. When we talk about the 5 remembrances, that we're all of the nature to grow old, get sick, and die, everything we have will be taken. All we have are our actions. That is what we are doing when we're paying attention. What does this situation call for? Frankl was saying, he said, you know, sometimes it requires us to take action, to do something. Other times the present moment invites us to just rest, be more contemplative. So we have to be present. And so how do we prepare for this constantly shifting landscape? Frankl says a foundation of love and kindness is imperative. And my latest favorite author, Valerie Kaur, who wrote See No Stranger, she talks about the same thing. We have to have this recognition of our interconnectedness and a foundation of love. The Buddha says we rest imbued with a mind of kindness, metta, friendliness, karuna, compassion, mudita, appreciative joy, equanimity. So that is how we move through the world, with this foundation of the heart practices, the beautiful qualities. I was in a group the other morning with Larry Ward and his wife, Peggy Ward. And Larry reiterated the importance of this. Larry is a student of Thich Nhat Hanh, and a very, very wise teacher in his own right. So if that is the underlying foundation, this goodwill, this friendliness, this kindness, this compassion, it seems that there might be something that we can overlay on top of that to build a stronger foundation. And that, I think, is where like the Eightfold Path comes in. Sila, ethical behavior, integrity. How do we show up in the world? The wise action in the Eightfold Path, not causing harm, not taking a life, cultivating kindness, cultivating generosity, cultivating wise speech, you know, learning how to live with harmony with other beings. That's huge. Recognizing when greed, aversion, delusion are present, because that's what drives so much of our behavior. That's what drives so much of our unskillful behavior. I believe most of the time when I caused harm, I was being driven by fear, which is, you know, or aversion, you know, not getting what I want or losing what I had, you know, not being okay. And how do I make sure I'm okay? Instead of a more wise, what is actually happening right now? Not some, and I didn't even know what I wanted, but it was like, I'm not going to get it. I don't know what it is, but I don't think I'm going to get it. So how do I find my way? So when the invitation was to just pause and be, there's a chance for us to take our breath. And when I was talking yesterday, somebody was mentioning about Viktor Frankl's quote, you know, there's this in between stimulus and response, there's a pause, and that gives us the option, I'm paraphrasing, that gives us the option to react in a different way or respond wisely, which is freedom. That's also the Buddha's second foundation of mindfulness. When we recognize when things are Vedana, feeling tones, is this pleasant? Is this unpleasant? Is it neither? Because often when something's unpleasant, we react with aversion. If something's pleasant, we react with a grasping. But if we pause, if we give ourselves that moment between stimulus and response, perhaps just being still is appropriate. Or maybe taking some action is appropriate, but not a habitual action that we take just because we've been conditioned in a particular way, these habit energies that we have. So we have this foundation of the Eightfold Path that kind of aligns us or guides us. And the other, I did some chaplaincy training a number of years ago, and then I did another one a couple of years ago, and they had us do this core values exercise, which I also found was really helpful. And they have a list of, I think you can find these on the internet everywhere. They have a list of a bunch of qualities, values that people find important and helpful. And so they ask you to go through and write down all the ones you find are meaningful. And then, excuse me, create 5 different groups out of those, kind of group them into 5 different areas, and then pick one of the core values to kind of title the groups. And again, what that does, it's not about developing a rigidity, but it's creating an outline in a way that guides us so that we can respond wisely. Is this aligned with what I really believe? If we don't have it defined, it can we can be swayed very easily. But if we have this foundation of steadiness and clarity, then moving in a direction that's wise and skillful and non-harming is a little bit easier. It's not always easy to do those things, but it gives us some help. It's wise intention. Again, Eightfold Path. It's a guide so that when we're like, oh, wait a minute, where am I? Sticking our head out of the fog, we go, oh, wait a minute, I'm way off course. Help me realign, help me get back in. This is what's important. This is what I think is the wise thing to do. So we have to, as I mentioned, find out how this works in our lives. Ehi passiko, how does that show up in our lives? How do we just be present in this moment? How do we take responsibility for wise action and wise behavior, and kind of living in a way that's fulfilling and kind and important, that's not driven by shiny things, squirrel, oh, what's over there? Or I remember I was driving up to San Jose yesterday, and I was thinking about musicians and songs. I think I was listening to the radio, and bands that I don't actually care for, but they were really popular at one point in time, and all the cool people had their records and liked their music, and I'm like, oh, I need to like them so I can be cool. I mean, I really struggled with that. I had these things that I defined as cool, and but I had no interest in. The people I liked, people I respected, they liked them. So I thought I needed to like them too, because I had no bearings. I had no grounding. I had no values. I had no recognition that I am enough. And what I like, just because they like that music doesn't mean I have to like that music. Oh, there's a tremendous freedom when we're not chasing it. And I've come to realize there's no such thing as cool anyway. So there's a freedom there when you know there's no such thing as cool. So the tentativeness of life gives us part of that foundation. If I know that I can get, splattered tomorrow, am I living my life in a way that's wise and skillful and kind? We begin to let go of what's non-essential. I mean, it doesn't mean we don't do silly things, or I love baseball, so I'm going to keep watching baseball. But it's non-essential, and it's just something that brings me some ease in the moment. But Cornfield says in The Path with Heart, he says, in the stress and complexity of our lives, We may forget our deepest intentions, but when people come to the end of their life and look back, the questions that they most often ask are not usually how much is in my bank account, or how many books did I write, or what did I build, or the like. If you have the privilege of being with a person who is aware at the time of their death, you find the questions such a person asks are very simple. Did I love well? Did I live fully? Did I learn to let go? It's not about the outsides, it's about the insides. I heard this years ago, and it cracked me up, and it's still so true. No one on their deathbed says, gee, I wish I had spent more time at work. That's usually not a regret that most people have. And one of the exercises that Cornfield offers around this is to, and I mentioned it a moment ago, recognizing that we're enough just as we are. He has us really recognizing the importance of seeing our own good. Again, reflecting on our mortality and just doing a simple reflection of thinking back over our lives and coming up with one or two instances of how we were kind or did something good for someone else. They don't have to be grandiose, they can be whatever pops up. We don't self-censor. And it's that the things that matter in life the most, or can matter the most in life, are not dramatic, they're not grand, but when we touch one another, when we're there in the most attentive and caring way. I know some of the examples are like when we sit with a friend in the emergency room for hours, or we go with a friend to take their dog to the vet to be put down. Those little acts of kindness, those acts of connection and caring. I had a conversation the other morning with a woman, and we were talking about how we are it's so important to recognize we are enough, because we're so good at pointing out our lack, our faults, where we come up short, that it's important to recognize that we are good. We are enough. We are not necessarily done yet, but for this moment, we're enough, So the invitation is to be kind and loving to ourselves, to each other. It doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean we're not unskillful at times. I noticed at times today on my drive, I was saying some rather not nice things to those drivers on I-5 that'll just come screaming up and jump in front of you and then have to slam on their brakes, those kinds of people. I thought not nice things about them. And then I'm like, shouldn't I be thinking not these things? I should be thinking other thoughts about them that aren't so rude. But anyway, you know what I'm saying. We're not perfect, but we're walking this path, walking towards freedom, walking towards liberation for all, not just for ourselves. And that's where the values come in. That's where being present comes in. That's where recognizing this tentativeness of life. We may not have time. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? Why don't we do it now? So thank you so much, my friends. As always, you're such kind attention, and I truly appreciate it. And I hope this has been of some benefit. And if there are any questions or comments or rebuttals, I'm always up for that. Well, thank you, my friends, for being here. It was nice to spend the afternoon with you. It's I think sitting and sharing Dharma is helpful after after a long weekend, the long weekend that I had. It's good to just be for a moment and remind myself about what makes most sense for my life. And so thanks for being here and helping me ground. And so again, I think in the chat you can find the link to the Donna button, which helps to support ICD and support the teachers. And again, reminder, next Sunday, if you come here at 4:30, you might be alone because the group is moving to 10:30 online and in person at the Mizell Center, and all the info is on the website. And Tuesday evening class, Wednesday evening sit, and Friday afternoon metta. Well, thank you so much, my friends, as always, for being here. Excuse me. And remembering that we don't just practice for our own benefit, but we practice for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. Thanks, friends. Have a good rest of your day.